it gets tough for a lot of people if they don't really understand how to go and chase what they want in the right way, right? A lot of people have shiny object syndrome where everything looks amazing to them, and so they try to do a bunch of things at once and they don't do any of them, right?
Welcome to the Disgruntled PM podcast.
Welcome, everybody. I'm Trevor, the Disgruntled PM, and with me today is Dennis Cisterna, the real estate mogul and old college friend. Do you realize that we've known each other for over 25 years, Dennis?
I do. It's been a long time.
So I've known you for a long time. Why don't you introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. My name's Dennis Cisterna. I'm the co-founder and chief investment officer of Sentinel Net Lease. We're a privately held real estate investment firm. I've spent roughly 25 years kind of working my way up the commercial real estate investment and development world. At one point, even actually being a project manager myself for a big home builder called Lennar. And worked my way all the way up the corporate ladder, decided that wasn't for me, and then launched my own investment firm about 7 years ago.
Has it really been that long?
Yeah.
Wow. So I guess we can go ahead and get started. And I want to hear more about you being a project manager. I didn't even know that.
That's not a good fit, let me tell you that. The most successful people can identify their shortcomings quickly. And for me, that was very, very readily apparent as a project manager. My ADD did not do well sitting in 3-hour meetings discussing the benefits of using a 3-foot wide pipe versus a 3.5-foot wide pipe for a sewer drain in some random city in Southern California. So it was quite interesting, though, and this was in 2004. I think project management in general had not evolved to where it is today. We didn't have scrums. We didn't know what agile was. All I had was Microsoft Project and wondering why my schedules were slipping all the time outside of my control. So it was definitely a good building block for me as a business person, as a leader. But I'm also glad it's in my rearview mirror, and I salute all the other project managers out there, because I think you are either born to be a project manager or you should stay the hell away from it.
So when you say, you were doing project management in the construction industry, correct?
Yeah. So I was entitling large tracts of land. So it was a multidisciplinary approach where I had to coordinate it's not a story that any project manager is not familiar with. It's all about herding cats, right? So you have a bunch of stakeholders who don't necessarily have the same alignment or vision, and you try to make sense of it and keep everyone focused and on time and on budget and everything else. So, when we're entitling land for hundreds of houses in Southern California, not only did we have to rein in all of our service professionals, our actual contractors, our vendors, engineers, we had to deal with municipalities and then their sub-agencies. And then, of course, we had to deal with the politicians and the public, and everybody else wants a little something different. And it makes that very challenging. And Southern California is kind of ground zero for politicized real estate development. So everything takes longer, everything's more complicated, everything's more expensive. And for someone that's wired like me to just go and put your foot on the gas, it was a very frustrating experience. But yeah, it was very, very, very interesting experience to really see how much goes on behind the scenes to really get something from just being a piece of dirt to, having houses on it.
Well, I wouldn't sell yourself short on that you're not designed to be a project manager, because one of the traits that I've noticed out of PMs that are successful is they pick a direction and go. Like you can spend hours arguing over minutia and details, but sometimes you've just got to go and make a decision and move, because otherwise that's how projects fall apart, is staying stagnant.
Yeah, you're right there. I think probably where I grew frustrated with it was that ultimately, although I was the project manager, there were so many things that were outside of not only my control, but even my company's control, that I didn't have the directional capability because we were dealing with external forces. I think a lot of folks in project management, at least they hopefully are empowered, or they are dealing on something that they ultimately can pick a direction and go and lead a team. In this situation, it was a little bit more complicated than that, but it's it's not always easy when you have to deal with parties that have conflicting goals, right? So
Yeah. It it's always fun when you're stuck between two stakeholders that are each telling you go this way and they're pointing in opposite
right,
directions.
exactly.
So, you've handled about close to $4 billion in real estate transactions across the US and Europe. For our listeners who are managing projects, not portfolios, what's the project management secret to closing a deal like that? Some of those deals.
Boy, uh, it really goes back to creating alignment with parties and understanding where there's friction and resolving it. It's more about conflict resolution than anything else, frankly, because at the end of the day, people want to um, buy and sell properties. They want to invest. They want a good return on their equity, and so ultimately, to get something from the starting point to the finish line, of course, organization is key. But really, what you find is, especially if you're in any kind of intermediary fashion, I find a lot of project managers hold that role where they have to kind of balance the pull from different factions. When I was in investment banking, which is where I did a lot of that $4 billion, it was very similar. I was working on behalf of investors and developers, and then I would go to solicit, other investors to invest capital in their deals, and so or work with lenders to go and give them the capital needed to fund their development or their new acquisitions, and so um, you know, you're always pitching things as if the best case scenario is going to happen. And of course, anyone on the counter side of that is going to say, well, what if you don't hit that number? What if you don't get that interest rate? What if you don't sell the property at that price? And so I think you have to couch what that upside is and present a logical downside to things as well, and say, look, here's our best case scenario, here's our worst case scenario, and here's a bunch of intervals in between. So we're probably going to land somewhere in this range. And I think setting those kind of expectations of ends of the barbell help out a lot in terms of knocking down some of the smaller issues you have along the way.
Yeah, so when you start talking about some of that stuff, it's realistic expectations and presenting real statistics and real projections and not just, hey, this is what we hope to get, but we're pulling these numbers out of the sky because that's what we think we want.
Well, that it's a real hard thing as anyone that is not necessarily the lead, right? So as a project manager, maybe your chief revenue officer has some pretty aspirational goals for the end result of the product you're creating, or and at the end of the day, their elevated sense of what this will do for the company from a revenue or profitability perspective, maybe that puts a big burn rate on cash. Maybe you sink a ton of resources into it, but their pie in the sky expectations aren't really tethered to reality, and it puts the project management or the product management team in a very tough spot, in my opinion, because you're fighting an uphill battle the whole way because your original project wasn't tethered to reality, right? It's really, I think, a challenge where you always need some kind of stakeholder that is grounded in what the fundamental is, or at least a counter voice to the rah cheerleader that says this is going to change our company no matter what it is, right? So I found that's been very important for my company, especially as we've scaled. As our chief investment officer, I'm very focused on growing the company. But at the same time, it's impossible to continue growing your company if you make bad investment decisions, right? So um, at times I'm fighting with myself, I'm fighting with my staff in terms of what is growth for the sake of growth versus intelligent and scalable growth. And I think a lot of that goes back to just setting expectations for the team and what's doable, what's not doable. And especially, I find a lot of people they worry about the things that don't matter instead of the things that do. So they're going to get caught up on some minutia that doesn't change the deal or the project 1%, and that'll take up 20% of their time. And I think if you have a good project manager that sees where the different value inputs are in a project, it's a lot easier to stay on point with the things that matter the most, right? Like, don't worry about this 1% roadblock. Whether we're right or wrong on that 1%, it doesn't really materially change the deal. So let's not spend too much time on it. Let's just find a resolution to it and go. And instead work on knocking down the bigger problems that could be much larger impediments to reaching our desired goals.
So you hit on something there that I want to kind of pull on a little bit. You said, because you're speaking as the executive, almost like as the executive sponsor, the executive stakeholder, and you said people tend to focus on the minutia and the wrong details. How do you, as a stakeholder, kind of grab your people politely by the collar and say, you're focusing on the wrong things. This is where you need to be focusing, not there.
Part of it is understanding your team, I think. I think that's where a lot of companies really have a natural weakness, is not understanding how to communicate effectively. Not everybody is built the same. Not everybody is going to respond to challenges the same way. You have, like, so just using people on my own team, right? Like, I am not a super high detail person unless I need to be, because I am trying to think of the larger vision of what I want to achieve within the company. Now, I have a lot of people on my team that are technical experts, where they're very good at their one thing. And occasionally I need them to have a wider view of things so they don't have that tunnel vision of some of the minutia. It doesn't mean I don't want them to be good at the minutia, but I can't have it paralyze their process. And so it starts with that communication. And I think if you're clear on, hey guys, we're trying to achieve this, and of the 10 things it's going to take to get to the finish line, these 3 or 4 are the most important. And if you get stuck on one of those, you got to let me know. If you get stuck on one of the smaller ones, coordinate among yourself and make the best decision possible. And I think that's really helpful. You got to give some level of empowerment and agency to people, especially if you don't think it's really a, live or die type of issue that they're going to try to be getting stuck with.
Kind of going back to the beginning where, the PMs and the leaders need to be empowered as leaders and not as lemmings, I guess would be a good term.
They're not order takers. That's really what
Right.
it comes down to, right? And that's where I think a lot of people, they screw up, not just with project managers, with anybody that's not a senior executive, is, you think, I will tell you, I've made this mistake before myself, because my brain's going 100 miles an hour. And when I explain something to somebody, I feel like I've given them the total context they need. But I do that in a vacuum, right? It's a weakness of a leader when they're going to give instruction and not take into account who they're giving that instruction to, and whether or not they're even letting them have the ball and run with it, right? Like, there are so many unintentional micromanagers that paralyze project managers, vice presidents, directors, and I think that's just, it takes time, and it's very hard to coach up. As a project manager, it's very hard for a project manager to go tell his C-suite that they're doing it wrong. That's an intimidating order. A lot of times you have too much verticality in the organizational structure where people don't feel comfortable giving advice up. I think that's a mistake. I don't think that means a 22-year-old intern should go in and tell the CEO his investment strategy is wrong. But I think you should have enough confidence in the people that you've hired that they can raise their hand, or at least tell you that, hey, I don't think we're quite doing this right. Or, hey, if you can just if you can just let me do 80% of this, I'll come to you on the big stuff that you've already identified as really a gating issue.
Yeah, it's kind of like they say it a lot in the movie industry where they'll screen a movie before it's released, and people will will reply back with feedback saying, well, I don't understand how this happened, or I don't understand how that happened. And the people that were editing, that wrote it, that starred in it, were so close to it, they just forgot that they cut something out and took it for granted.
Right. Yeah. Right. You need to have that level of. I think you need to always take a step away and get that extra level of visibility. But I think that's, what you're talking about now is it really transcends project management. It goes to corporate culture. It goes to personnel development. And if you don't have the right leaders in that organization, your project managers are ultimately going to become disgruntled because they don't have the support. They don't have the support. They're not empowered. And most project managers are they're a hell of a lot more than a glorified order taker, right? Like they are your on the ground quarterback. And so the on the ground quarterback doesn't want every goddamn play thrown into their helmet. Once in a while they need to call an audible because they see what's going on in the field.
Yeah, I like to say that we're the conduit because we translate from the team members up to executives, kind of like an office space. We're people.
Right.
We're that conduit that has to tell both sides, draw it with crayons for me like you would for your kid in kindergarten.
Look, I think simplicity is highly underrated in terms of downward and upward communication across an organization.
So let's move on a little bit to something that I know you're passionate about because you do a lot of public speaking on economics and real estate. And what's one trend right now that you're seeing amongst project managers? We'll go outside the real estate industry and just in general that you think the PM should be paying attention to.
Well, I would push this beyond just project managers, but I'm a huge proponent of technology and AI, and I feel like there are two camps within the workforce in general right now, and I think this is really evident in product development, project management, where you see people that are using different AI tools to supercharge their productivity, their efficiency, and other groups that are afraid of it and not willing to embrace that. And as someone that, I'm no spring chicken, right? I'm gonna be 50 in a few years. It's unavoidable. So you might as well get ahead of that curve and really enhance your offering to your employer, to your project, to whatever it is you're doing, because that future is coming for you, whether you like it or not. And it's quite interesting when I have conversations with people in different age cohorts about how they respond to this. I mentor a group of young leaders for the Urban Land Institute. It's just a real estate organization, and all of these, kids, for lack of a better term, are in their early to mid 20s, and not a single one of them they all use AI on a daily basis. Whereas if I go to lunch with a handful of my friends that are in the C-suite, most of them barely know how to work their phone, let alone understand the difference between ChatGPT or Gemini or Perplexity or, they're, and those are just obviously LLMs, right? It goes a lot deeper than that with what's coming. And so that is something that I am blown away. There's that much disparity between the haves and the have-nots, just because it is unbelievable. It's not going to replace people, but it's going to make, my opinion of it makes a project manager, it's like he has two virtual assistants constantly creating baseline information for himself or improving his processes. And I could not stress how important I think that is for this next generation of leaders to fully embrace that, not to become reliant on it. You still have to have some common sense. You still have to have people skills and soft skills. But in terms of it being a very powerful resource that didn't exist 5 years ago the way it does now. I encourage anybody to go running strongly in the direction of embracing all of the tools and technology that AI is helping us become a little bit better with.
Yeah, I mean, I think that AI is a very powerful, and you nailed it. It's a tool. It's not the end all be all, because I remember really literally hanging out with you in college when cell phones first came out,
That's right.
and we think about where they are now, and tell your kids, imagine a life where there's no high-speed internet, there's no streaming services, and there's no cell phone,
Right.
and see how they look at you like, what, did you live in the Stone Age?
It it was a pretty big deal when someone had a DVD player back in the day. So
Yeah.
yeah, and 15 years from now, it's going to be totally different than the way it is now, right? So I think you have to at least have a base understanding of the benefits of whatever technology is available at that time. You're probably not always going to keep up, especially if you don't have a tech bent to yourself. Learning is free, becoming smarter is free, and I think those tools, help out a lot right now. The people skills and the soft skills, that's the thing I actually get the most nervous about with the next generation, because especially those folks that didn't go into the office and get interpersonal skills developed, not necessarily just talking around the water cooler, but being able to go into your boss's office and ask a bunch of questions when you don't understand anything. Like that is absolutely the thing that I remember the most, that had the most value for me when I was an intern in college, when I was out of college my first few years. That formative ability to round out my knowledge base and my skill set and understand how to talk to people and how executives talk to one another, and how there's always some level of soft selling going on, even if you're not selling anything. And I'm a little nervous about, especially as it relates to project managers. If you want to be a great project manager, you obviously have to have great organizational and executional skills, but you also have to be, for lack of a better term, you got to be, if you're dealing with other people in your project, you have to have a certain level of charisma, of leadership, and those skills. I'm very nervous about what that looks like for the next generation of people that really are not growing up in the office the way you or I did.
Well, I mean, you bring that up, and it just made me think of something from when I was a pledge in the fraternity. One of the rules was you had to do alumni interviews.
That's right.
So here you are, a new guy in the fraternity, and you had to go talk to people who most likely graduated already, were older. You're probably intimidated by them, and you had to go talk to them. You had to go get that conversation. And a lot of them, they had their benchmarks of what you had to do and how you had to conduct that interview to get that signature. Otherwise, you wasted all that time and you still got nothing out of it.
Yeah.
Well, you got something out of it, but you didn't get what you needed.
Yeah. That's funny. Yeah. It's
That
it's funny. I was with my dad for Father's Day, and he was asking me a bunch of questions about like college and fraternity and everything else. And he's like, out of the blue, he literally said, he's like, I think you literally turned into a different person because of the skills you learned within your fraternity. And for any non-fraternity guys that are listening to this, or ladies, yes, there's a lot of fun to be had. A lot of what you see in the movies is very real, but at the same time, there is a tremendous amount of social skill development that translates across the board, because when you're thrust into an organization, which is what a fraternity is, with 50 to 75 people that you've never met before, that are of varying ages, that have varying interests. I mean, it's just such a great social experience, and a great melting pot of personalities that that I think really helped a lot. It helps a lot of people, especially if you didn't grow up in a framework where you already had those skills, or if you did have those skills, they become supercharged.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not just, the social skills. In a way, it's forced, because, what do you do over the weekends in college? You go to a party somewhere, right? But if you're hanging out with a bunch of people around you that are friends of yours, and then you're like, oh, hey, there's that person that I want to talk to over there. Someone is either going to say, oh, I know her, I know them, let's go talk to them. Or they're going to be giving you enough grief for you to go over there just to
That,
make everybody be quiet.
yeah,
And that's kind of, it's peer pressure, but it's to make you better.
yeah.
And we don't have that in the corporate world very much, because unless you get a mentor who really cares, that's something that is really lost in society, I think.
It's absolutely, and something that I speak about quite often is the importance of mentorship. Not only for not only for the mentees, but for the mentors as well. You know, one of the things I like about when I lead this group of young leaders within the Urban Land Institute, I don't have that visibility into what's going on in the workplace from the view of someone that just entered it, right? So um, there's a lot of times as a more experienced person in the workplace where you still think things are today the way they were in 2004, and they're not. And so now there's a lot of positives to that, there's a lot of negatives to that, but the one thing is it's different whether you like it or not. So having an understanding of somebody else's viewpoint today because they grew up in a totally different environment than you, I think is also helpful to collaboration and team building, and it makes executives better leaders the more they understand their employees. So it works both ways. But yes, I agree. It's woefully missing. It's something I experienced firsthand not too long ago, where it wasn't inside of my organization, but we used a pretty prestigious law firm on a large transaction, and they had put a senior partner on the deal, but the deal didn't require a senior partner. It didn't require someone that makes $850 an hour for their opinion. So the senior partner stepped away, and just a bunch of younger associates were now running the project. Well, the problem is the younger associates, none of them have really been taught to become leaders. So they were all kind of running amok, hoping they weren't making mistakes, copying each other on nonsense. And when we finally get our final bill, it is literally almost triple what it's supposed to be. And the reason for that is because there was no real project manager within the law firm running our account. It was a bunch of junior associates who had not been given appropriate direction and instruction during their formative years of COVID because they weren't in the office. So, you know, what happens then? You have these people that don't understand how to actually add value as an advisor, and instead they become order takers that are afraid to make a mistake. And it just became this ludicrous comedy of errors in terms of watching these well-meaning attorneys in their mid-20s make mistake after mistake after mistake, and then charging me in triple for it each time because they're copying all of their other associates. And I had to have a call with the managing partner of the law firm, and I said, "Hey, man, you guys have a serious problem in your mentorship and your education of your next generation of leaders, because they just don't get it, and it's because no one really told them."
Now you hit on something that I kind of want to talk about a little bit more, and that was they were afraid to make mistakes, and they wound up making probably three times as many
Yeah.
because they were terrified of making it, and then it was a replication effect, because if one made the decision, they didn't want to be different than everyone else, even if it was different to be right.
Yes. It had this compounding effect of mistakes multiplying and the cost multiplying at the same time. So it was not one of my fondest memories working with law firms, which I in my business I rely on them heavily. So when they make mistakes like that, and we kind of let that organization know and said, "Hey, you need like someone to step in here and manage this because it's getting out of control." And they didn't really have a middle manager to go in and take hold of the project. So the problem just continued to expand and become more exacerbated. And ultimately, we don't do work with that law firm anymore because of it.
Well, and that kind of goes to that whole concept of it would have been better probably if there was a hierarchy of interns or not interns,
Associates. Yeah.
associates, where one was the lead associate and then the other two followed. So at least if one person made the mistake, you didn't see it replicated 2 and 3 times over, because one person went a direction and then it went long enough to see where we could course correct rather than constantly making that zigzag of errors.
Yeah.
And every choice is a bad choice
Yes.
because you don't let it play out long enough to see if it went right.
That's right.
So now you sent me, when you agreed to come on, I sent you a bio sheet, and you sent me a story, or you sent me a prompt for a story that really has me curious, because I knew you pretty well in college, and I did not know you had a road trip that was your first road trip as a professional.
Oh yeah, when I was it was my senior year in college. I was an intern, and this was my first job out of college. Although I'm very surprised they had offered me the job after the way this went down. But, so I was an intern for this essentially a housing market and economic advisory company. So I was in training to be a housing market analyst, and so. As part of this, we did feasibility studies for developers all over and home builders all over the country. And so, because I was just an intern, I didn't travel anywhere. I just did all the charts in Excel in the office, and we were short-staffed. And so my boss said, "Hey, can you take a week off of school to go to Hawaii with me?" And I was like, "You've got to be kidding me. This is like the coolest thing I've ever heard of." And I had some pretty incredible things that occurred to me in college, but being able to go to each of my professors in my senior year and say, "Hey, I'm not going to be here next week. I have to go to Hawaii for work," and seeing the look on their faces like, "What does this guy do? Why is he here?" Was very cool. Now, what I was not prepared for was really setting down my fraternity mantle yet, because I was still in college. And so we go on this trip, and I'm blown away, right? It's my first time in Hawaii. I have a couple friends that are in college in Hawaii at the time. I go with my boss. I don't know what to say or do, because I've never been in this before. We're meeting with the client. He's walking us through some of the projects they've built. I ask possibly the stupidest questions ever, enough so where I didn't think there was such a thing as a dumb question, but rest assured there is apparently. And I asked him to the client. He's like, if you have questions, just ask me after the meeting. Don't ask me in the middle, because then it looks like you have no idea what you're doing, which is, why are you in Hawaii? And I'm like, I don't know why I'm in Hawaii. You brought me here. I'm just doing the best I can. But after the day of meeting with the client and touring projects and everything else and having dinner with my boss, I meet up with my buddies, and, of course, completely unprepared for, how to actually be a professional. So, my buddy, who I hadn't seen in a couple years, takes me all around to, a bar crawl in Hawaii till the wee hours of the morning. I meet up with my boss the next morning. I clearly look like a train wreck. I smell like a train wreck. And he's like, "Oh, you can't do this, right?" He's like, you're going to get fired if you ever do if we like bring you on full time and you ever did something like this, like, you'll get fired immediately. You can't act like this as a professional. And I was like, "Well, I didn't do anything during work. I was, he's like, no. He's like, "You're at work now and you're hungover and you're in Hawaii. So the client's going to go look at you and be like, this is not going to work for us. So you need to present yourself in a certain way." And it was a very early wake up call to realize there's a big difference between, working at a hotel as a valet in college and having really nobody gives a shit if you show up, a little hungover or anything like that, versus a real professional career, and you've got to take yourself seriously because you want others to take you seriously. And so, I give kudos to my boss for that, because he nipped that in the bud pretty early. And it doesn't mean you can't obviously have fun at work. A lot of people do, and it just means that you can't you can't party like you're 20 years old anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I had a job where I was traveling a lot and had a pretty nice expense account when we were out and about. And after the first night I went out, and we'll just say the company card was a little too generous to me. I learned very quickly after that, and I just said I don't drink at company functions anymore because everyone else can be the drunken idiot, but if I'm the one that's sober, I see everything and I hear everything.
Yeah.
And that's an underrated skill sometimes when you've got a lot of people drinking and talking. And
Yeah, lot of knowledge picked up there for sure.
yeah, exactly. So now's the time where we get into the hand curated questions for you.
Oh, okay.
So going back to the days of college, would you rather have every song you hear slowly morph into All Star by Smash Mouth, or have to yell yeehaw every time you stood up?
I think I'm gonna go with the yeehaw. I'm gonna go with the yeehaw. I don't listen to a ton of music, but I listen to enough music where I can't have Smash Mouth on 24/7. Now, if you said that was being changed into "Never Gonna Give You Up" by Rick Astley, I could probably roll with that. But Smash Mouth, not as much.
Well played, sir. Well played. So I know you like to work out in the gym. What's your favorite lift and why is it the back squat?
My favorite lift is probably just bench press, or leg press. Like, I'm naturally strong with my legs, so I can always leg press a ton, and I don't feel like I'm compressing my vertebrae the way I do with the squats. And bench press, I don't know. I just feel like bench press is just the all-American. Hey, you can throw up a few plates up there, and everybody in the gym says ooh and ah. So there's always something about putting 315 up there and having people turn their heads.
I wouldn't know what that's like.
We are not built the same way, my friend. You are strong for your size.
Well, strength is all relative.
That's
so
right.
I mean, and just like in life, everyone is on their own journey. Everyone is on their own deal, to where not everybody is meant to excel to corporate America and be the VP and the CIO and all that. And no, not everybody is meant to be Ronnie Coleman and paralyzed after you win Olympias.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll tell you what, anyone that spent any time in a gym knows that comparing yourself to others is a fruitless task, because there's always someone bigger, stronger, badder. And I agree with you on the corporate side. We've got one of our college mates, my good friend Keith. Keith is a great leader. He's a smart dude. And Keith made a conscious choice to not chase the career path as much as he cared about being a good dad and being a family man. And doesn't mean he's not successful, by the way. He's very successful, but he prioritized those things above kind of chasing his position in the rat race. And it's funny because when I was actually shocked when he kind of made that decision, because him and I are very similar in that regard of always holding leadership positions and doing things a certain way. And when push comes to shove, you know what you want to do, right? And it's not like there's any bad decision if it works out for you. There's no shame in being a great father, a great family man, a provider for your house. Just as there's no shame if you want to go, chase dollars or success to a certain degree. It's really the way your personality is wired. And what I tell anybody is, hopefully you like what you do more than anything else, because there's a lot of people that don't make a lot of money and they're miserable in their jobs, and there's lots of people that make lots of money and are miserable in their jobs. And so I think you've got to choose what works for you, because if you find someone that's passionate about what they do, whether they make a ton of money or not, you'll see that person is generally happier than the one that's not happy in their workplace, regardless of how much money they make.
Yeah, going back to the mentoring thing, I do a lot of mentoring for transitioning service members from the military, getting out and moving into the professional world. And the first thing I always tell them is, write down your top 10 priorities in the order of their importance, because that will dictate where your next step is. If you want to make as much money as possible, then be prepared to pick up and move at a whim, be prepared to be traveling, be prepared to be working long hours, be prepared to do all those things. But if you want to be home with your family and home with your kids, you're probably going to be sacrificing a payday, because that that's a trade-off,
Yeah. Yeah.
just like location.
Absolutely. And it's not always an easy decision to make, but you've got to have conviction when you make it, whatever it is. There was a
And
period of time where when my youngest or sorry, when my oldest son was born, where I didn't want to be traveling as much. I was not chasing the dollar quite as much. Now this was also after the great recession, so I was a little beat up emotionally as well as financially, but I also thought it was just important to kind of be around more and not necessarily on a plane somewhere. And so I made that conscious decision to stay grounded and closer to the family until I saw a time where I felt like I could do a little bit of both. And that's always it's always important to anybody, I think, is having that balance in your life. I think when you have balance and you can thrive on both sides of the coin, both personal and professional, both of them grow exponentially.
yeah, I mean, it comes down to your priorities can change over time, but when you have them, you need to focus on them to drive you, rather than saying, I want this, but I'm going to go chase the opposite.
Yeah. Well, it gets tough for a lot of people if they don't really understand how to go and chase what they want in the right way, right? A lot of people have shiny object syndrome where everything looks amazing to them, and so they try to do a bunch of things at once and they don't do any of them, right? They're trying to chase they're trying to catch 100 coins at once and they catch none of them. And I think really what you see most successful people, they figure out how to do one thing really well. And then when they've done that, they'll do something else if they want to. But it's really that being able to establish excellence in a singular thing. And then once you do that, that gives you the framework for how to establish and create excellence in other things. And I think as long as you don't spread yourself out too thin, you can accomplish a lot more than maybe what you think you're capable of if you want to. But it's really about being focused and working backwards about whatever your goal is, and step by step, how do I get there? I mean, it is essentially project management for life, right? And I think a lot of people, even good project managers, don't necessarily have that skill when it comes to their own life or their own accomplishments of what they want to get after, because some people just have maybe they have an arbitrary dollar number in their head, or they have a position in their head, but they don't think about, well, what steps am I going to take to get there? It's not like it's just one day, boom, I'm a millionaire, or one day, boom, I'm the CEO, right? It's like you have to think, what steps do I want to take to accomplish whatever goal that is, and then start enacting it, and then treating it like an actual project. Oh, well, I hoped I would be a VP by the time I was 32, but I'm 34. What can I do to get back on track? I think those are things that sometimes people, they get a little caught up in some of the minutia of life, because life happens, and then they're sidetracked a little bit, and all of a sudden they're looking in the rearview mirror saying, "Damn, I wish I just did this." Even for me, my entire life, I was like, I can't wait to become a CEO. And the minute I became a CEO, I was like, this sucks. I still work for other people. I have a board of directors. I have now, instead of building a business, I'm worrying about why my project manager and my software engineer are in a Nerf gun fight, a high velocity Nerf gun fight, and injuring each other. Like, this is the kind of things that you don't really think you're going to be problem solving when you become a CEO, but it literally is. So I was like, I don't like this. This is not really what I wanted. And that's what prompted me to quit and start my own investment firm. It was like, if I'm going to do this, I really got to do it on my own terms, not in somebody else's framework. And my only regret is I didn't do it sooner, frankly, because and the reason I didn't was because I was kind of caught up in following what I thought was this C-level track of corporate success. Meanwhile, I really knew internally I'm not really a great corporate guy. I don't like bureaucracy or bullcrap. So it's not really a great place for me.
Yeah, and I think that's a great place to end. And I think the piece of advice that you could impart is be careful what you wish for, because you might just get it.
I think everybody should do everybody should take, a few minutes every month or two and just reassess, is my end goal of where I wanted to be last month where I want to be today? And am I closer to that, or am I further away from that? Or do I want something different because I've now shifted what my priorities are? I think not enough people do that. I certainly did that, right? I just had this CEO thing in my head. Meanwhile, I wasn't taking into account how my own life and my own personality and my own desires were changing over time. So I think I guess that is a great way to end it. That is a great closing.
So I'll hand the floor over to you to tell the audience about anything you've got going on and where you want them to find you.
Well, unless I know you, I'd prefer you don't find me. But if you do find me, when I created Sentinel Net Lease, we did it to really democratize real estate investing for everybody. So what's cool about our platform is we have investors both big and small. We have over 400 different investors. So if you've ever thought about, passively investing in real estate where you don't have to be the landlord, you don't have to worry about broken shower heads or collecting rent or anything like that, that's why we created Sentinel Net Lease. So we go and we buy properties all over the country that produce cash flow from day one. And so we're in the middle of a fund right now where we're still raising capital. If you want to learn more about it, you can go to sentinelnetlease.com and learn all about it. Our investment strategy, we do pretty well. We've outperformed the market since inception, which is something that not too many companies can hang their hat on. And we're excited about where things are going. This is a kind of weird economy right now, and I really focus on trying to capitalize on dislocation in the market, and luckily there's a lot of that. So it's provided us a good runway for success, and we're always happy to have new investors come aboard. So visit sentinelnetlease.com for more info.
Yeah, I'll have links to that in the show notes. And when does your funding round end for this round?
The fund ends its capital raising at the end of this year. So there's another 6.5 months basically of fundraising to go. And then we don't draw down all of that capital the day you decide to commit. We draw it down over time. So if you invested sometime between now and the end of the year, we're only going to call that capital in percentages over maybe the next 6 to 12 months after that. So it's not like you need all the capital you want to invest at that one time.
So commitments are required by the end of 2025.
That's right.
Okay. I want to timestamp it a little bit so people listening in the future know we're not talking about 2027 or something like that.
When people are listening to this in the future, it might be Opportunity Fund 9, which still go to the website. I'm sure it'll be on there as well.
If Dennis isn't running it, someone else will be.
That's right. If I'm not running it, hopefully I'll be on a boat somewhere.
Boat or a yacht?
Whatever. Same thing.
So with that being said, like and subscribe to the show pages for the Disgruntled PM. Leave a review. I'm the one that responds to all that stuff. So I'll end it as I always do with, may all your deliverables be on time, your budget's in the black, and your scope not creeping. For Dennis Cisterna, I'm still Trevor, and I'm still the Disgruntled PM.